I believe it's recording.
It says it is.
It says, okay, great. Okay. I think it's recording, but right now it's only recording Nicole. It's only recording you. So I'm trying to make it stop doing that. There we go. Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are here to talk about the Sac City Fiscal Recovery Plan that was released the week before break. And I know you all have a lot of questions about it. I have prepared quite a bit of information for you tonight and just a few housekeeping items in terms of how this is going to work. I'm going to run through all of the information that I've prepared for you. It's going to be quite a lot of me talking for a little while, and then when we get to the end, we will open it up to questions. I have our PTSO board as well as our school site council here tonight. Our PTSO president, Nicole Purcell, will be helping to manage those questions. Rather than opening them up to verbal questions, we're going to ask that you put them in the chat at the end. That is disabled right now, so we can all focus on the information at hand, and then I will enable the chat when we get to the end of the presentation. Please keep yourself on mute. I tried to set this up so that everybody was muted, but I am not an expert in Zoom in the way that many of our teachers are. So hopefully I got that part right. But if I didn't, please just be mindful that your audio is on mute. We are recording this session, as I told those of you who were here at the beginning, but just letting everybody who's now arriving know that that this session is recorded. It will be posted on our website, and I'll be email blasting it out for families who are unable to join us tonight. Let's see, my goal is to wrap this up by 7:30 at the latest, including opportunities for questions so that we can all have a little family time this evening as well. Many of our teachers and staff are joining us tonight, and so I want everybody to be able to have some family time. If I do not get to all of the questions before 7:30, please just keep putting them in the chat, and I will save the chat and reply to them in an email when we're tomorrow probably. So a couple of things to keep in mind as we go through this information tonight. The sky is not falling. We have proposed cuts, but these are not finalized cuts. So they are proposed, and one of the things that we know based on our board and based on public activity and what we've learned through IB in terms of taking action is that our voices really matter. And we have an opportunity to take action to preserve our program for our students and to take action to call on our leaders in our district and in our labor partners for fiscal reform to preserve and improve the futures for all of the children in our city. So we are here tonight for our kids and for all of the kids across Sac City who really need our district to provide them with the best quality education we possibly can. IB guides us to be open-minded thinkers and inquirers. You are going to hear things tonight that are probably disappointing and unsettling. And instead of laying blame or pointing fingers, I ask that you really think about what you're hearing and which parts of it resonate with you and how you and your family feel comfortable taking action. That's going to be different for every single family, how you take in this information, how you connect with it, and what you want to do with it. This is also not about specific people in our program. It's not about how we or you feel about our district leadership, our school board, our teachers, me. It's about a system that we all need to work together to fix. And that's one of the things we'll be talking about tonight. Last but not least, I am not a budget expert. So this bodes well and not well because I'm not an expert. I've made this as simple as I possibly can, which I hope will help some of you better understand the situation. But on the other hand, because I'm not an expert, I might not be able to answer some of your questions tonight. So I'll do my very best, and I will definitely help find answers for the things that we aren't able to answer this evening. So with that, let's dig in to our information. So as far as our agenda tonight, I'm going to share some details with you about the Sac City Fiscal Recovery Plan. And then I'm going to take a little sidestep from that and show you all how IB is funded at Caleb. This is a really important piece in order to understand the impact of this fiscal recovery plan. Then we will talk about the fiscal recovery impact on Caleb, but we're also going to talk about the impact of IB PYP on Caleb and what we've seen, the trends and patterns we've seen over the last 7 years as we have transitioned to full implementation of this program. Then we will talk about the fiscal recovery plan's impact on our district. There are quite a lot of other programs and children who are going to be affected if this is approved. So it's really important for us to be thinking about that big picture as well. We'll talk about what the next steps are, and then we will talk about where there are opportunities for you and your families to take action. So this fiscal recovery plan came about because several of our board members requested that the district put together a fiscal recovery plan to address the ongoing structural deficit in our district. So the issue that we have, and you can dig, I'm not going to go into all of the slides with all of the numbers about how much money we have here and how much money we have there. All of that is available in the district fiscal recovery plan, which you can click on and go through slide by slide. But
Erin,
yes.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt. I'm so sorry. I can't actually see your presentation. I just have a black screen, and Jen just texted me the same thing.
Oh no, I'm glad you're interrupting. Okay, let's fix that.
Sorry.
It's okay. Okay, now you can all, let's see. Okay. What do you see now? You. You just see me?
Right.
Okay. Sorry guys, thanks for your patience. Okay, so when I share my screen and I go to Google Chrome, what do you see now?
I see your presentation.
Great. Okay. Yes. Awesome. Thank you all very much. Okay, carrying on. So the ongoing structural deficit, right? We're making more money, or we're spending more money than we're bringing in every year. And we're creating a bigger and bigger problem every year that compounds on top of itself. So the issue is that the district has been sort of making up for this structural deficit with one-time funds. So sometimes those are grants, sometimes those are balloon payments for things. They're all kinds of things that are one-time funds, but they're nothing that addresses the ongoing structural deficit. The other piece is that we have two kind of buckets of money in terms of the revenue that comes in. Some of it is unrestricted, and so that's like our general funds, and then we have money that is restricted, and so those are funds that we can only spend on specific types of items or specific categories of items. So for example, we have local control funding formula that needs to be funneled toward our kids, our low-income students, our limited English proficient students, our foster youth, and like that. So there's two big chunks that we're always looking at. There's also negotiable and non-negotiable items. So negotiable items are all of the things that are in all of the labor contracts in our district. So those are salaries, those are benefits, those are furloughs, and those items account for 90% of our unrestricted funding. So when we're talking about the areas that we can manipulate in order to close the structural deficit, 90% of that revenue is spent on benefits and salaries for our staff, which is critical. We can't, they're our bottom line, right? We have to be able to compensate and support our staff in order to be able to provide the quality education that we would like to our students. But those are all negotiable items. So we can't do anything with those unless they're negotiated with the various labor partners in our district. And if you're not sure what the labor partners are, we have SCTA, which represents the teachers. We have SEIU, which represents the classified staff. We have Teamsters. We have UPE, which represents the principals. So there's a number of labor partners in our district that negotiate collective bargaining agreements around salaries and benefits and working conditions and all of that. Then we have Non-negotiable items. So those are the things that we're going to be talking about tonight. So items like staffing overages, non-mandated services, central office personnel, expenses, travel, professional development, things like that. So non-negotiable items do not require us to go into negotiations and come to agreement with labor partners in order to make those cuts. And this is where we are getting hit tonight. So when we start talking about the non-negotiable items in staffing review and non-mandated services, the district conducted an assessment district-wide of all programs to see which programs are over staffing formulas. And so that's one of the things that's going to be really important as we carry on, and I'll share that with you in just a few minutes. Okay, can you all still see my screen? IB/PYP funding, I'm assuming I'll get a flag if you can't. So before we go into how the fiscal recovery plan impacts our IB program and how we operate at Caleb, I would like to share with you how IB is funded in the first place. So the district contributes funds for our program that cover our IB coordinator, and it used to cover our Spanish instructor when we were using a model where we had an instructional aide providing that instruction with a classroom teacher attending it. Now we've shifted that model, and so we have a certificated Spanish teacher, and that's now funded through a different revenue stream. So it doesn't actually count as part of IB, but it's in the allocation for this year, so I wanted to include it. The district also covers our IB fees, and we also receive a training allotment every year to cover training for new teachers. PTSO then funds all of our awesome enrichment. So PTSO funds art, music, all of the resources that we need to purchase for learning engagements in our classrooms, field trips, assemblies, all of that kind of stuff. And then we use some of our local control funding formula, which is allocated by our school site council, to fund teacher collaboration and IB materials that are really focused on differentiation and providing access to all students. So our total program allocation for this year is $261,000, give or take a few dollars here and there. So if you've had a chance to dig into the fiscal recovery plan and you've clicked through on various slides, you would have gotten to a sheet that goes into detail about the line items and what's being cut at each particular site and in each category. And where you'll see Caleb is where it says school programs above formula reduced to base. So that formula is a staffing formula that's applied to all schools in our district, and it has to do with the student teacher ratio. And at Caleb, we are overstaffed over formula by one FTE certificated. So that's one full-time equivalency certificated staff member. So certificated is all of our teachers. So our classroom teachers, our special ed teachers, and our IB coordinator. And then we have this 0.84 FTE for classified, which is that Spanish position that is now being funded through the teacher prep needs. So that position is a little bit different. So Caleb has one FTE certificated position above formula, and that funds our IB coordinator. So this reduction would eliminate our IB coordinator at Caleb. And you all know and love Kelly Cordero, and that's who is in this position right now. So to put a name or a face with the position, that's what we're talking about. The 0.84 FTE classified position is no longer needed now that Spanish is funded through teacher prep funding. So that reduction does not actually impact IB at Caleb in the way that the 1.0 FTE certificated position does. So let's assume for a moment that this fiscal recovery plan is approved on December 10th. And we said, okay, well, we're just going to cut this program down to the very bare minimum and see if we can somehow fund it so that we can carry on with an IB coordinator and all of that. So this is what that would look like. to fund an IB coordinator, the package is $110,000. So that's salary and benefits. An average teacher is actually $126,000 for salary and benefits per year. And so this is actually on the low end based on our current coordinator. Annual IB fees are $9,500. We have to pay those. And then we also have to be able to prove that we are doing professional development and teacher collaboration in alignment with the IB standards and practices. So that's to a tune of about $25,000. So let's say we said, okay, for a few years, we're going to do without all of that enrichment and we're just bare bones on IB. The minimum need would be $145,000, but without that district funding, all we are left with is what PTSO is able to fundraise and what we have available through LCFF, which is about $45,000. So the bottom line is that we do not have the means to offset the loss of our district funded IB coordinator if this FRP is approved. So the bad news about that, aside from the fact that Kelly makes our world go round here, is that the IB coordinator is a required position in the IB standards and practices for authorization as an IB world school. So if we don't have a coordinator, we don't get authorized for IB. It's a required position to run the program. Also, it's a really critical component for our program to be innovative and collaborative and healthy. We need that instructional leadership around IB. So we're in a reauthorization cycle. So you all remember a few years ago we were reauthorized. So we are set to begin, that's a 5-year cycle. So we are set to begin the process of being reevaluated in the 2022-23 school year, which is coming up pretty quick. And we would not be able to move forward with that reauthorization effort without our IB coordinator, which means that we would not be able to be reauthorized in the 23-24 school year. So that's the bad news side. Now I'm going to share the good news side with you, which is that IB has had a profound impact on many components of not just our community and our culture, but our operations at Caleb. So since we began the transition to this program, our enrollment has increased by more than 155 students. So prior to the transition, we were operating at K6. This is after we eliminated the 7-8 with about 400 students. And last year, we were up to 559. And even with COVID, we are at capacity in all grade levels, and we have 95% or more daily attendance. And so what is important to note here is that our district, in addition to this financial crisis, and in addition to the pandemic, our district is also suffering from an enrollment crisis. So many schools are experiencing loss of enrollment right now, but we have been quite insulated from it. In fact, we have students who are still on our waiting list in almost every single grade level, waiting for a spot to return. They've been placed at alternate sites because we didn't have space for them right now. So we've been really insulated from the effects of the pandemic and distance learning. And that recruitment and enrollment directly impacts our revenue. And the way that revenue is calculated in California is that it's average daily attendance, which is how many students per day are in a school, and that's multiplied by their proportion of funding. And so that means for every student that we have enrolled, our average daily attendance, you multiply that by $7,500, and that's how much revenue is driven into the district based on our enrollment. And so if you consider that 7 years ago, we only had 400 students, and last year we had 559 students, you multiply that increase by 7,500, and we are bringing in an additional $1.1 million annually in revenue that we were not bringing in prior to having IB at Caleb. So once you factor in the cost of running our program, remember we saw that it was $261,000 this year. So you take that out of the almost 1.2 million, and then you make adjustments for staffing to accommodate that increased enrollment, right? Because with 150 students comes 5 additional certificated staff that we're now needing to compensate. Even once you take all of that out and you adjust for all of that, we are still generating enough revenue in a single year to more than cover our program expenses and generate additional revenue, which is funneled back to the district. And that's around $200,000 to $300,000 a year, additional revenue that goes back to the district because our enrollment has increased so significantly in these last 7 years. Also, let's move on from the operational part to what this has meant for our kids. So from an achievement perspective, which is, you know, really how the health of our program is measured externally, for achievement, our students have increased 20 percentage points in language arts and 10 percentage points in math since we started IB here. And the combination of IB with inclusive practices, which is how we provide our special education services with our students who have special needs in our general ed classrooms, and our special education teachers pushing in and providing support to them, as well as early interventions to other students who need them. We've seen our achievement for students with disabilities increase from 19 to 47% in language arts and 16 to 33% in math. So that's a pretty healthy growth there that is an indicator of how successful our program has been for our students. Additionally, culture and climate is a huge emphasis in our program. You see evidence of that all the time, even through distance learning. And there's consistent evidence in our annual culture and climate surveys with a 90% or more positive response rate every year after year. So another metric that shows that the positive impact that this program has had at Caleb. And we have a thriving school, we have a thriving neighborhood, and that has in turn increased property values in this neighborhood. I've had families and realtors talk to me on numerous occasions about how difficult it is to find homes in River Park. Oops, I'm going backwards. So those are all of the pieces that IB has brought to Caleb and brought to our district. Moving on. So I want to also bring your attention to how this fiscal recovery plan impacts other sites around our district and our district as a whole. So if you dig into the FRP and you look at all of the line items, there are a lot of things. It shows assistant principals being cut. It shows charter contributions being cut. It shows more certificated staff being cut. There are a whole bunch of things in there that are not super clear. So I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you all what those are about as well. Particularly, I know many of you are interested in what's happening at Kit Carson because of the IB pathway. So the staffing reductions in this fiscal recovery plan decimate specialty programs like IB, like Waldorf, because we require extra staffing to meet those program requirements. Remember, we talked about that staffing over formula piece, and we're not the only ones who are in that position, right? The IB schools that have IB coordinators, so us and Kit Carson, Burbank has an IB program, and then you have the Waldorf schools. So you have George Washington Carver, the high school, you have 2 K-8s, Alice Burney and AM Wynn. So all of us are in the same position where we have staffing that is over base. And so when the staffing review was conducted and we were brought down to base, those positions are eliminated, which directly impacts the functioning of the programs at those schools and the viability of them. So Kit Carson is dealing with that piece. Kit Carson is also facing serious staff reductions because they are a small high school. So this one is a little complicated, but stay with me for a second. So our small high schools, in order to be able to offer the breadth of courses required for students to graduate from high school, to meet graduation requirements, and to meet A through G requirements, which are those courses that students need to satisfy in order to be able to apply and get into the universities in California, in order for small high schools to offer that variety of courses, they are overstaffed because they have single subjects. And so you might have a math teacher who's teaching a couple of different courses, but doesn't necessarily have a full load because there aren't enough students to manage all of those classes or to fill all of those classes, but they have to offer them in order for students to graduate. And so when you bring those sites back down to base, they lose the ability to be able to provide all of those courses. So our small high schools are very much at risk right now. That includes Kit Carson, School of Engineering and Sciences, New Tech, but I know that Kit Carson is one that is of particular interest to us. Other staffing reductions around the district that are pretty devastating are the elimination of inclusive practices at the middle and high school levels. So Cal and McClatchy are the only secondary schools in our district that offer inclusive practices. So remember, that's how our service delivery model for special education. It's where our students who have IEPs are in general ed classrooms, and we have special education teachers who provide support in those classrooms, sometimes outside of them based on the student's needs. And then they also provide interventions to other students who do not have IEPs, but early interventions to be able to shore up learning gaps and unfinished learning. And so the reductions at both Cal and McClatchy essentially eliminate those inclusive practices position or programs. So when you look at the FRP and the line items, you'll see that Cal is losing 5 certificated staff and McClatchy is losing 10. And so that's extremely devastating for those programs as well. And again, like IB, like Waldorf, like our small high schools, these are programs that draw families to our district and keep them here. And it's a very compelling argument for why we need to keep these, is because without these programs, our specialty programs, our small high schools, inclusive practices, these are families that, like some of you, may make a different educational choice if those options aren't available to you. So it's not just about losing programs, it's about losing families from our district as well. There's also other staffing reductions that eliminate the ability of K-8s to provide the breadth of courses that they need to, similarly to our high schools. Staffing reductions that eliminate our music, visual, and performing arts teachers at the middle school level. And funding reductions that pay for high school advanced placement and IB assessments for low income students. Really critical, again, in terms of being able to offer our students everything they need in order to be ready to graduate and be ready for college. Also, there are staffing reductions that limit services such as GATE, career technical education, after school programs, school safety. So there's a lot of things in this FRP. Some of the things that you might notice are not listed, and this is one of the ones that we talked about at the beginning, are benefits contributions, furloughs, salary reductions, and subpay. And those are in the FRP at the beginning. They're listed as potential cost savings, but they are not actually in the fiscal recovery plan as options, because as we talked about before, those are negotiable items. And so they aren't things that the district can just say, okay, the school board can't say, okay, we're going to vote to do this without getting labor partner agreement first. You'll also notice in the FRP that there are central office reductions that include travel, professional development, and office supplies, but no staffing reductions at those upper levels. So that's another question that you might have. Let's see, getting toward the end. So there's lots of information out there, lots of questions about this fiscal insolvency piece. And so what the district is trying to do with these cuts is to prevent a state loan and takeover, right? So we are currently slated to run out of cash in May of 21. So 6 months down the road. And so the intent with these potential cuts is to close that structural deficit so that we get out of this risk area of fiscal insolvency, which we've been in this cycle for the last few years. And one of the things that keeps happening is that there are revenue variations that have the potential to delay but not eliminate the takeover. So for example, there are cost savings that have occurred last year and this year because of the pandemic and COVID-19, where we are not spending on certain things, and so in the unrestricted category. And so that has allowed us to to kind of kick the can down the road, so to speak, on fiscal insolvency. But if we don't close this structural deficit, it does lead us to having to take a state loan, and which leads us to being taken over by the state. So once that happens, our district leadership and our elected board lose their decision-making authority, and we have reductions then imposed on us. So let's say the board doesn't vote to approve this fiscal recovery plan, and we're happy, we get to carry on with IB, but then 12 months down the road, we go into fiscal insolvency and state takeover, then reductions then get imposed on our district, on our schools, and all of our labor partners. So things we're trying to avoid right now could happen involuntarily if there were a state takeover. Additional program services staffing are reduced. And I think the thing to understand here is that those reductions have to be more than what the district is trying to reduce right now, because not only do they have to satisfy the loan that we would get from the state, but they have to satisfy also the interest on the loan that we get from the state. So it's growing what those reductions need to be in order for us to get back to fiscal solvency. Okay. So next steps, I'm actually going to back up a little bit and tell you what has been done so far. So when I learned about this fiscal recovery plan and that we were going to be losing, if it's approved, our IB coordinator, I immediately started putting together all of the information that you've seen tonight and shared that information with both our board member, Leticia Garcia, and our superintendent, Mr. Aguilar, and ended up having conversations with both of them about the impact of this potential cut on our community at Caleb Greenwood. And if you watched the board meeting on November 19th, you would have heard board member Garcia ask a few questions, and she specifically asked a question about IB in terms of, does the decision makers who put this particular plan together know that eliminating that position prevents us from continuing to run our program? And she followed that up with requesting impact statements from every site and program that's being affected. So that's in the works. The information I've provided you tonight has also gone directly into our impact statement. And those impact statements are going into the board agenda and packet for the December 10th board meeting and will be released on Friday. And you'll be able to see details about each site and program and how they are going to be impacted. So, if you're wondering more about what's going to happen with Kit Carson or the inclusive practices programs or things like that, that information will all be in that board packet. And I'll be happy to link that and send that out to everybody once I receive it as well. The next, there's also a lot of other things happening behind the scenes in terms of advocacy at the district level with the school board around the really critical piece of getting site input for how these decisions are made and making sure that when the board does vote on them, they really deeply understand the impact at the sites, which many of us believe they didn't know when this was first presented. So there's a lot of educating people that's going on right now. Like, I'm educating you about what's going on with the fiscal recovery plan. I've also been educating others about the impact on Caleb should this plan go through. Possible scenarios for the December 10th board meeting. So the board could absolutely approve the entire fiscal recovery plan in full. I don't see that happening, but it's definitely a possibility. The fiscal recovery plan could also be partially approved. The board members could decide to vote on it by specific categories or line items. They could not approve it. They could vote on it and not approve it. And then another scenario that I think is probably very likely is that the vote will be delayed. But that's why we're here tonight, is because in order for us to ensure that the first and second scenarios don't happen and impact our program, we need to take action. So that's when it comes down to what you guys can do. So the first piece is really about getting informed. In my conversations with families and many of our staff members here at Caleb, there's a lot of concern because everybody feels like they're not sure what the facts are. There's a lot of conflicting information out there, and it's really difficult to sift through it and make sense of it. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with all of you tonight, is so that I could clearly lay out what we're looking at. But in terms of understanding the history of it and how we got here, there are a number of budget reviews that have been conducted by independent agencies. And so I've included those in my last slide tonight, and I'm going to post all of these slides on our website. So there are a number of them. I'm going to click over to them and then come back. So there's fact-finding reports, FCMAT reports, which is the Fiscal Crisis Management and Assistance Team. The Sacramento County Office of Education has an ongoing analysis. So I really encourage you to really inform yourselves about what's going on. Obviously, there are some other things that I've shared with you. I've relinked them here. So there's information on our website. You can click through to the fiscal recovery plan. You can go into the details. And then I do recommend also going back and watching that November 19th board meeting. Fast forward to the 90-minute mark, and you'll hear the superintendent and our chief business officer, Rose Ramos, talk about the fiscal recovery plan in great detail, and they'll explain our current budget. So when I was saying we're operating at a structural deficit, and there are all kinds of slides in there that tell you how much money we have in reserves and the carryover and all of that, Ms. Ramos goes into great detail about that, and she did a nice job of relating it to, personal financial decisions and like that. So I recommend doing that, and that would also give you an opportunity to hear what each and every board member had to say afterward. I think that part is really important because it gives you some insight about the leverage points for each one of them and what they're interested in. So when you start thinking about what you might want to do in terms of advocating for our program and fiscal reform in our district, knowing how the board members responded is really helpful. So the next piece, take action. So I want the message tonight to be very loud and clear that yes, we need to advocate for saving IB at Caleb. But as you saw in terms of the fiscal recovery plan and the impact on programs and students around our district, we also need to advocate for fiscal reform across our district, everywhere, because just advocating for Caleb doesn't actually solve the long-term problem. And it takes care of what we want to take care of right now, but we also need to be part of the bigger solution as well. There are a couple of pressure points here. The school board, absolutely, and our labor partners, absolutely. It takes all of us to be able to fix this problem. So we can't just rely on those items that are not subject to negotiations in the fiscal recovery plan and from previous cuts. We have to really leverage items that we all negotiate around in order to be able to close this structural deficit in the long run. Last piece, this is just my little plug. If you have not filled out your LCFF form, one per family, that is really critical information. Even if you aren't going to qualify for free and reduced lunch for your kiddos, that's really critical information, and you're not actually revealing very much about your income. It's like 2 clicks and then you're done. So please, please fill that out as well. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to enable the chat. And if you have any follow-up questions, I am all ears or eyes at this point. And I also had mentioned to our PTSO and our school site council that if they had anything that they wanted to add to this, to please feel free to do so. So let us know, PTSO and school board and school site council. Okay, Ingrid, who and where do we send our letters to? So I will include that information along with the slides. So any communication is, well, let me back up. As far as what you do about action right now, I really encourage you to think about what has resonated for you and your family tonight, right? There's all kinds of differing opinions about how we solve this problem, and I'm not here to try to convince you or make you think a certain way or any of that. My goal tonight was to really present you with the facts and for you to take that information and decide how you want to advocate and with whom. So I will share the contacts for our board members, our superintendent, and our labor partners when I post this on the website so that you can decide how you want to do that. I see another question, is there value in going to the December 10th meeting and giving testimony? I absolutely think so. It can get really jammed up. Just so you know, at the last board meeting on November 19th, there were 119 comments, and the vast majority of them were about George Washington Carver, the Waldorf High School. And one of the pieces of feedback that we got after that in the principals union was that, yes, we absolutely need to advocate for our program, and that's really important too, but we also need to recognize that it's part of a bigger picture. So I think that if there's absolute value in giving public testimony at the board meeting, you can call in and say it yourself, or you can write it in and have somebody read it. But I really encourage you to go back and revisit these slides and think about that big picture. And key point, we bring in money for the district, and we pay for ourselves. And so when we start talking about the value of our program, yes, there's incredible value for our kids. And I think that that's really an important piece of this. And you guys all have so much evidence of that in your homes and in your interactions with our staff and what's happening with your kids. And I really encourage you to include some of those beautiful, incredible stories, but I also really encourage you to focus on the pieces that are going to be compelling. And one of those is that we generate enough revenue to pay for our own program. And that's really critical. And actually bring in more, right? But I think just the piece that we are paying for our own program through our increase in enrollment is really important. I also think that if you have, I've talked to a couple of parents who have said, the only reason why we even stay here in this neighborhood and in this district is because of IB, because we have Caleb, because we know that we have Kit Carson, it keeps us here. But if that weren't an option, we would probably actually move our whole family out of the district. And at the very least, we'd be looking at other schools. And so I think that that's another compelling piece that our board and our labor partners need to hear as well. Let's see, are there any other, mentioned the proposed cuts would not affect our Spanish teacher, but a quick summary of the proposed cuts to the district. I'm not sure. A quick summary of the, i.e. not the schools. Okay, so that was the quick things were cuts to the GATE department, the career technical education department, after school programs. I think those are the top three. School safety, those are the areas where there are proposed cuts in the fiscal recovery plan for the district. Let's see. So additional Spanish support. So that reduced FTE in our classified staff would absolutely impact how many classified staff we have. But I don't actually know right now what that would look like. But, we do have 4 instructional aides, and that 0.84 is the equivalent of an instructional aide, but I don't actually know what that would look like. Can you give a quick, okay, I've got that one. On the number of families that would not be in the district without IB. I do not have that data, and I have thought about doing a survey to find that out. And I think I'm going to hold off on that right now, knowing what I know about where I think we're going with this in terms of the impact statement and what's going to be presented to the board and the conversations that I've had. But that's definitely something that we can consider doing down the road. But the district hasn't done a one, and I think that's a really good point because we do also have Kit Carson to consider in that. I'll look into that. Is it possible that a coordinator position could be shared with another IB school? It's an interesting idea, Tony. Thank you for bringing that up. I think in theory, it's certainly a possibility. In practice, it would be extremely, extremely difficult given the workload of what an IB coordinator does, particularly with those evaluation cycles. And I have to tell you that Kit Carson and IB are almost on identical evaluation cycles. And we work Kelly to the bone when we are not in an evaluation cycle, and when we are, it's even more extreme. So yes, it's certainly something worth exploring. That gives me anxiety to think about trying to have her do all of that work. Let's see, is West Campus also considered a small high school? You know, not in the way that the others are. They have enough students that they are able to fund at base without any of the issues. So they are not in the situation of having to reduce FTE. Okay. What is the, okay, absolute worst case scenario. What is the unfulfilled gap between what we have and what we need? I believe that there was a slide that reflected a gap between 45 and 145. If that money were raised, is there anything the district can do to restrict how those monies are spent or pluck from to spend elsewhere? So if we were to somehow raise $100,000 directly to pay for an IB coordinator, we would get to pick how we spend that money. Yeah, so we can fund positions through LCFF and through what you would consider donations. Same question, can it be position privately funded in part or in full? Yes, it can be. But I want to remind you all that we're coming off of COVID, and a year of fundraising in COVID is very different than a year of fundraising in person. And what our PTSO is able to bring in this year is very different than what we've been able to bring in past years, right? We didn't have a jogathon. We will be doing a donation drive shortly. You know, we will be doing a virtual auction, but we do not have the same fundraising capacity. And so, you know, that 36,000 that PTSO funnels directly into our IB program is even in question going into next year, depending on what we're able to fundraise this year. So all of this aside, that's a really important piece too, is that we absolutely need to continue to donate to PTSO in order to, let's say, best case scenario is that we get to keep our coordinator position. In order to keep everything that PTSO does, we have to continue to fund PTSO. And so that upcoming donation drive will be really critical when it comes to that. And even more critical if it looks like when we find out more about what the board is going to do about this recovery plan. Let's see, the data you've shown indicates that the revenue from Caleb's IB program is greater than the expense, covering itself and bringing extra revenue to the district. Recognizing there is and should be equity consideration, how has the district incorporated these considerations into its budget cut formulas? Based on what we know, they haven't, hence the impact statements that we have been working on and that are going to be presented to the board. How about a virtual jogathon like Run to Feed the Hungry? We have absolutely talked about that. We just need somebody who wants to run it. So if you are interested in doing a virtual jogathon, please email me and I will put you in touch with our PTSO because we would love to do something like that. We just need a person. Let's see, Caleb brings in extra revenue for the district. Does Kit Carson do the same? I do not know the answer to that. So that's a question that we will find out a little bit more about when we read Kit Carson's impact statement. Let's see, other than the cuts to the schools, are there proposed cuts to district staffing? Not to my knowledge, not in this fiscal recovery plan, except where it comes to possible cuts to positions like GATE, career technical education, teacher induction programs, things like that. So there's a few small cuts to potential programs, but nothing sort of at the upper level. Let's see, where and how can we submit a letter to the school board in time for the December 10th meeting? Is there a link on the school district website? Thank you, Jen. I will put when I put my slides up on our website, I'm going to include all of that information for everybody. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Okay. All right. Is there more impact text versus email? Not sure. Who are you texting to a board member? Is there more impact, like if you text a board member versus if you provide public comment? I haven't tried to text a board member, so I'm not, I mean, I've texted Leticia Garcia, but I'm not sure. I mean, I would say they're going to get an influx of emails. We are not the only school who is advocating right now. So I think a combination. I also know that you can call and leave voicemail messages. So I would really, you know, vary how you want to do this. I think that the impact is going to be in the message, right? And our collective message about what we expect our district leaders to do right now in terms of preserving our program and preserving programs for kids all over our district. So I would say, I think you should advocate in the way that you're most comfortable advocating. What do you think will happen? Is our school IB program likely to be removed based on what you know? I wish I had a crystal ball. I do not know exactly what is going to happen. I know that we have made a very compelling case to keep our program. And I have been keeping this data for a long time because I have always known that we need to be able to justify the existence of our program, especially when we start talking about the additional resources that we're receiving in a more affluent area, and that other schools aren't necessarily receiving these kinds of services and programs. And so I've always been really mindful about that, and that the only way that we can justify it is by maintaining high enrollment and demonstrating that it has good outcomes for kids. And so, you know, if you're on our staff, you hear me talk all the time about data and continuous improvement, and let's make sure we're getting these kids and identifying students early so that we can provide early intervention, so that we can keep them off a special ed track. That's all part of the health of our program. And so, you know, we have collectively built a case for the value of this program to our community and to our district. And honestly, where I would love for this to go is that our model grows, right? And that this type of model where we have IB and we have inclusive practices, because they go so well together and they really serve kids so well, is that this is a model that is replicated throughout our district eventually. And so, you know, there's a lot of value in keeping this here. So I hope that we don't lose it. I think that there's a pretty good chance that we won't, but I think that that really depends on all of you. So let's get at this. Let's see, please. Yes, Jill Olmstead said, if you know families who could not attend tonight, please encourage them to listen to this recording and hopefully take action. I will be sending this out as soon as I have it available and encouraging everybody to do the same. How will we lose teachers if we lose IB? So not in and of itself, right? We lose that one certificated staff member. And honestly, the reality of it is that Kelly has seniority here. And so she would bump a staff member, a teacher who has lower seniority than her. And then losing teachers just depends on our enrollment. Can you please explain how the IB program produces revenue? It has everything to do with our enrollment. So our enrollment brings in revenue for the district. So it's our average daily attendance times the $7,500 proportion we get, and multiply that by all of our kids. And that's how we generate the revenue for the district. You mentioned not just the school board, but also labor partners as a pressure point. How do we communicate with the labor partners? I'll share that information with you as well when I share the school board information. I'll do all of the labor partners. Could you put together a one-pager with key talking points we can use when we advocate for the program? I'm going to say no, and here's why. I'm going to share the slides with you, and I want you to pick the parts that resonate with you, that matter to you and your family. And if I start putting that information into your heads for you to advocate it becomes less about what your family needs and wants and more about what I need and want. And this really needs to be about what all of you want. But I am absolutely going to share the slides, and you can pull from everywhere to be able to advocate. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be beautifully written. It just needs to be why, what you're asking for, and why. Has the district presented any other plans that they think could fix the structural deficit? So if you look at the fiscal recovery plan, I encourage you again to watch the board meeting, because the beginning of that, they talk about some other possibilities. So they talk about healthcare savings, they talk about furloughs, they talk about the impact of 1% salary increase or decrease. So there's some other options in there that are really important to pay attention to. Oh goodness, Eric Strands, how would the day look without the IB program? I'm not going there yet. I cannot, I don't know. It wouldn't be like, one of the things that I've said to our teachers again and again is like, once an IB teacher, always an IB teacher. Like, it doesn't, like, you don't get the IB sucked out of you, right? If you don't have an IB coordinator. But the authorization piece is really critical, and that drives our teacher collaboration. It drives our units. It drives everything we do here, everything. And I'm not going to say that like IB coordinator goes, authorization goes, and we, turn into this school down the street. But what I am going to say is that piece of it permeates everything we do. It's impossible for me to know what it would look like. Do you know if the KIT principal has been tracking data, increased enrollment, test scores, et cetera? I don't. And I actually have been so busy trying to get this stuff all figured out for you guys that I haven't connected with him in the way that I want to. So that's on my to-do list tomorrow, is to schedule some time to talk with him about it. So, and I'm going to share this with him as well. So I'm going to provide him some support on that if he needs it. Okay. Oh, Kristen Tudor. Kathy, yes, she is on school site council there. So Kit has been tracking all of that as well since turning to IB. Okay. So I'm going to wrap it up. It is 7:30. I would like for everybody to go enjoy your children or enjoy your families or enjoy some no screen time. I know many of you have been on screens all day. I see some happy kid faces back there, which I just love. See the Eckerly kids. I see Stromae. Oh, hi guys. Okay, I gotta go. Oh, look at all of you. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen today and share your thoughts with me. It's wonderful to see all of your faces, and you will be hearing from me soon. And please, please reach out if you're trying to advocate and you don't know what to do. I'm happy to provide some support. Have a good night.